Alright, I think this is a fine hand to keep. Got lands and spells, so we would much rather be on the play, of course, but that's going to be the case with basically all of our hands. So here's an attune. We'll see. Okay, our opponent has revealed a mountain, so this could definitely be a mirror match. We don't really know. Could be some other type of energy deck, but pretty likely our opponent's going to be making use of the energy. And here's a Voltaic Brawler, so looks like a mirror match so far. So in this matchup, we're going to definitely want to try to win quickly. So do we want to play the Brawler here? Or do we want to play the Servant? That's definitely a tough question. The Brawler can attack for 4 next turn, which is pretty nice. So yeah, I like going with the Brawler. We want to put ourselves in a position to be able to win on our turn 4. Especially since we're on the draw. And we're just going to hope that our opponent doesn't have the nuts, basically. We can also block the Brawler, but not too keen on that because our opponent could very easily have a pump spell to get it through. Either way. So I think we want to take this, and it looks like our opponent isn't pumping, which is interesting. So going to take the damage here from our opponent's Voltaic Brawler. And now here's the Pummeler. This is definitely scary because our opponent can just kill us pretty easily. So the question is, do we want to take a conservative line here? If our opponent has a larger than life, we're just dead. Blossoming Defenses. I don't believe we're just dead to 1 Blossoming Defenses, but our opponent could pretty easily get up to 9 energy as well. So we could take a more conservative line here. And play a blocker like a Voltaic Brawler. I guess that's kind of what we're forced into doing here, even though I don't like it. So we're still going to attack with our Brawler that we have for 4. And we want to put a blocker into play. It's either the Servant or a Brawler. And the Brawler being able to deal 3 is kind of nice. I guess we go with the Brawler here. This is going to mean that we're not going to be able to kill our opponent on turn 4 because we're forced to try to not die to this Electrostatic Pummeler. Now, if our opponent has larger than life here, we're just dead no matter what. That's the unfortunate part of this. And there it is, the larger than life. So that's going to make the Pummeler into a 5/5. And we're about to take 1,000,000 damage, basically. Our opponent's got access to 9 energy now. We can Blossoming Defenses our Brawler. But yep, there's the 20/20 Pummeler, so that's going to do it. Our opponent could even pump 1 more time. So that Brawler, that Pummeler our opponent had in play was going to become a 40/40 creature. Wow. Okay, so moving on to the sideboard. We were not really in that game, and our opponent just completely wrecked us. So, thinking about what we want to do to combat this matchup. We want to board in removal for sure. So, cards like Bombardment, Harness Lightning, and Incendiary Flow. And I think we are on the play. This is definitely a weird matchup because Bristling Hydra and Blossoming Defenses can get around removal to some extent. I do like the Bombardments and the other removal spells, but then do we go ahead and board out our pump spells? That's the question. So this sideboarding for this matchup is not easy. Because we have cards like Chandra, Torch of Defiance, which we can go to if we want to. Arlene Core, Nissa. I definitely like the Chandras. Arlene Cord seems like it could be fine, so we definitely have to shave on some of our pump effects for sure. So, Blossoming Defenses, I think we can afford to board out some out. We definitely have to board out some creatures. So, yeah, we're basically becoming more of a mid-range deck, but with a lot of removal. And that's one of the sacrifices to boarding in all of these removal spells, is we basically have to cut down on our primary game plan. So, yep, let's go with this. It's kind of a weird configuration. Honestly, I haven't played the mirror that much, but it feels like we do want removal like the Bombardment. We still got some pumps, so we have Larger Than Life and Pummeler in hand, which is great. So, and it may be that because we're on the play, we weren't actually supposed to board in all of our removal, but in any case, we have Larger Than Life and Pummeler and a 2-drop, so we have a nice draw here for sure. And hopefully we can do what our opponent did to us last game. But now if our opponent boarded in removal, their removal spells are going to be quite good. So we have to be worried about that. If our opponent kills our Pummeler, for instance, we will definitely be pretty sad about that. So we can get in with our Brawler if we want to. And I think we do want to. The question then becomes, do we want to spend energy to pump it up? And I like spending the energy here. We really only need 2 activations of the Pummeler with a Larger Than Life in hand anyway. So we can pump it up to a 4/4 right now. Now if our opponent has a Harness Lightning for it, that's definitely going to be annoying, but if our opponent has some other removal spell, we can get around it. So there's an Electrostatic Pummeler. So our opponent has one of their own here. And a Galvanic Bombardment. So the Bombardment is going to force us to use up energy here to save the Pummeler. So that's a little bit annoying. So we have to figure out how exactly we want to proceed. We can play the Bristling Hydra if we want to. We can also bombardment away our opponent's Pummeler, which is pretty attractive. So, a reasonable amount of options for sure. I think our best bet here is to get this Bristling Hydra into play. So let's go with that. Even though we could still die, it's definitely possible. But let's play our Bristling Hydra. That's going to mean we're up to 4 energy. We can now... We don't even really mind trading off our Pummeler if our opponent wants to do that. So I think I like attacking with both here. And pumping up the Brawler. So, if our opponent blocks our Pummeler, we can then use our energy to pump it. And then our opponent would have to use 3 energy of their own. But it looks like it's going to be no blocks. So we have the Bristling Hydra back. And we're at 20, which is, I mean, pretty good place to be, especially sitting with larger than life bombardment in hand and 3 energy as well. So with making the Brawler bigger, it's nice because our opponent is now down to 11. But had we saved that energy, it would have been more fuel for the Pummeler. So there is a give and take there for sure. But I like trying to get in early damage because now even without the Pummeler, say our opponent uses a removal spell on the Pummeler here, we can still just win with our other creatures. But it looks like our opponent does have a larger than life. The larger than life is now going to make the Pummeler into a 5/5. And our opponent's going to get in here, it looks like, as well. So, in this spot, we're pretty committed to blocking now with our Hydra. Just to try to stay alive. It's unfortunate. But you gotta do what you gotta do, basically. Because say our opponent has something like a Harness Lightning. They could Harness Lightning and then have 6 energy to be able to pump the Pummeler twice, and that would be 20. We're at 20. So we're going to block defensively and most likely live to at least see another turn. What we really don't want to have happen is our opponent have a removal spell for the Pummeler, because that will put us, our Pummeler I should say. Alright, here's a build to smash. So now our opponent's got 5 trample damage coming through. They could have pumped up the Pummeler, but decided not to. So here we can actually just Galvanic Bombardment away our opponent's Servant of the Conduit if we want to. And this is going to mean if our opponent has a bombardment of their own, they're going to use it. Now that they didn't bombardment, we can go for the win here with larger than life. So we play the larger than life first, pump the Pummeler and attack for the win. So now we're on to game 3. So for that game, kept in 3 Pummeler, 3 larger than life. And that seemed to be pretty reasonable. Blossoming Defense is nice because it gets around the spot removal like the bombardments. It may be that on the draw we actually don't want the Hellions at all. I kind of see that because the Hellions eat up so much energy. We can go back to our Pummelers and our larger than lifes and Uncaged Furies on the draw, if that makes sense. We're still cutting some built to smashes. I think Arlencourt on the draw is probably worse. So the question becomes, what do we want back in? I think we want Built to Smash back in our deck for the deciding game. Because we've seen just how important these Pummelers are. Our opponent killed us with Pummeler game 1. This last game we got the Pummeler into play first. Blossoming Defense, the reason why I don't like them as much is because we're just not going to have mana up that much of the time. So let's go with this configuration. I still like the Chandras. But being on the draw is definitely rough. Our opponent won the die roll. And this is a matchup that's definitely die roll dependent. So we're going to need to break serve here, essentially. Pretty good hand. We have our Built to Smash and larger than lifes in our deck, which would go great with this Uncaged Fury that we have. Alright, here is an Attune that we can play. Actually got 2 Attunes, which is kind of one too many than we would actually like to have. So now our opponent's playing a Servant, and we have to decide how we want to react. But I think we don't need to do anything just yet. We can play our own Servant and just pass back. And this way, we can either play Bristling Hydra next turn or Electrostatic Pummeler. Assuming that our Servant stays alive, which it very well might not. Harness Lightning is a good removal spell, but we have to be wary of a card like Bristling Hydra, which can get around any removal spell. And here's a Bombardment, so that's going to take care of our Servant. And put us in a little bit of a tough spot. So I think we want to go ahead and get rid of our opponent's Longtusk Cub here. So I'm going to Attune first. And then Harness Lightning away the Cub. And the reason why I don't like playing the Pummeler there is we don't have another pump spell to go along with the Fury just yet. We don't want it to be taking hits from our Longtusk Cub, because then it could just get too big and could get out of control. We're fine with taking the hits from the Servant for now. We also have a Bombardment to deal with the Servant if we want to do that. Well, that's definitely worrisome, but now I think we definitely want a bombardment, or actually we drew Chandra. We could Chandra away the Pummeler if we wanted to. But I think we want to wait on the Chandra. We can play the bombardment on the Pummeler, and then play our own Pummeler, which seems like a pretty nice turn. So we've still got gas left in our hand. 3 non-creature spells, exactly what we want. We're also up to 10 energy. So this Pummeler can become absolutely massive now. And it's basically threatening lethal as soon as we attack with it, if we have mana up for this Uncaged Fury. So really no reason to block here. Just going to take the damage. And here is a Voltaic Brawler. Okay. So I think we want to attack with our Pummeler here. And we'll see what our opponent does. So no blocks. So we could pump it up to a 2/2. Then it would go. Then we would have 10 energy. We could make it a 4/4 and 8/8, and then a 16/16. So our opponent should be dead here, assuming I have done the math correctly. We go Uncaged Fury. Now that that's resolved, we use energy, make it a 4/4, make it an 8/8, and then bang, 16/16 double strike, kill ya. And that's just what this deck does. That's gonna be the match here.